Hello and welcome back to Gems of War art review. Last time we did A, and it took quite a while to get through it. So today we are just, as last time, going for one letter. B this time. No need to mess up the order that the game have so nicely laid out for me. So, as the same subjective review of the art from the last. So, I will be reviewing each of these monsters slash heroes slash creatures slash cards, if you want to call them that, by the following measurements. General artwork, which goes up to 1 to 10, 10 being the best. Theming, also going up to 10. And finally, naming and description, which only goes up to 5. So, a perfect picture, a perfect piece of art with a funny tagline and a good name can score 25 points. Anything below that is, well, in the 20s range, it's close, but a few things are lacking or it just irks me in some of the wrong way. I think the lowest we've had so far is 16. At the point of recording this, I have only just begun editing the first one out. Now, I recorded for over 2 hours and 15 minutes, so hopefully this one can be a little shorter. I haven't checked to see how many I have with B, so compared to how many I have with A, but let's see if we can. I think we had 2 out of all the cards last time that reached a possible 25. So it's not like I'm head over heels for everything that this game does. And as explained in the first episode, question mark if you can call it that, obviously a game with this much artwork, there are multiple artists at work, which is fair. I mean, I wouldn't want to make over 1,000 different pieces of artwork for a single game. Oh, well, unless I got paid really well for it and someone wasn't expecting too much of me, because I am not an artist. I can't draw very well. Obviously I can draw, but it's not very well. So, with that aside, let's get into it. First off, we have a classic, well, not so much a classic as a kind of a legendary story. There are a few that sort of have this sort of play back on words. Okay, so this to go into. Okay, so the description. In the last one, I went with the description first, then the theming, and ended up with the general artwork before heading into the general scores, before heading on to the next one. I'm going to do the same for this one, because it had kind of a good vibe, and I kind of get the sort of time to, when I'm sort of describing the theming and the description, I am at the same time sort of looking at the general artwork and seeing, sort of making my mind up about the final artwork score. Okay, so the description here for Baba Yaga is: lost my broomstick, found this pot. It fits. It's not overly funny, but it's not bad either. So 4 could be funnier. Okay, for the theming, so Baba Yaga is a legendary witch, and I believe, now I'm not entirely sure on where the origin of the Baba Yaga stories come from. I would say Eastern Europe, maybe Russia, but I don't know for certain, so don't quote me on that. Given that, I would say that her outfit, what with the fur and the simple but likely fairly warm clothing, probably fits quite well with the theming. I think she is lacking a bit of accessories. She is a very, very plain looking, like, basically just an old woman. I know that some of the stories about Baba Yaga is that that's exactly how she gets you, is by looking just like an old woman, so she doesn't look like a witch. But I would still like a bit more accessories, like a necklace of perhaps bones or something like that. And I'm kind of not getting the vibe that, yeah, obviously she can cast magic, as the purple swishes going around her is likely to indicate. But I think they could have done more with it. We are going for an 8 on the general theming. Room for improvement, but pretty alright. General artwork. Well, the theming part plays in on top of this. Now, the general artwork is about how well is it drawn? Is there large splotches of single color? Is there lacking detail? Or is there just something unsettling about the way? There will be some particular ones with faces where the face is very off-putting. That last part is not the case with Baba Yaga, luckily. And given the fact that she has this sort of sheep wool's, I want to say vest, but top essentially, that is quite well detailed. And there's an attention to detail. There's also an attention to detail in the rope that is around her wrist and holding her shirt together on her chest. That looks really nice. Now, I would perhaps like a bit more detailing on her. What is that? Is that supposed to be a ladle? I think we can see if we go. No, that doesn't show. That just shows that she is sitting in a pot, which you don't really see from the big picture. I would like a little more detail on that. That seems a little too plain for my tastes. I will be less inclined to ask for detail if it's on, like, a weapon, especially bladed weapons and such, where I'm mostly looking for, does the blade look like it's worn or chipped, which if it fits the character, like if that character is meant to be a squeaky clean paladin with a brand new sword, for example, you wouldn't expect chips and notches in a sword. But if it's like a rough bandit or something like that, you kind of would expect a bit of the grime, perhaps. So I'd say for the overall artwork, it's pretty good. We are ending up at 9 out of 10. So 9 plus 8 plus 4, that is 21. Not bad, Baba Yaga, not bad. Okay, next up, we have Baby Dragon. Yep, come back here. Don't feed him after midnight. Okay, that's a play on babies, basically, so it's not as funny. It's not unfitting, which have put some others down in the description, but it's also not. It's not funny or punny. And I'm the type that if I am telling a pun or a dad joke and it makes people groan, that is my day made. Again, going for a 4, nothing wrong with it, but it doesn't make me laugh or giggle as I perhaps wanted to. Okay, the theming. Okay, so we have Baby Dragon, so we'd expect either an adolescent dragon, which would be hard to gather unless we had something to signify its size. However, they've sort of avoided that in a good way by putting eggs. And not only putting eggs, but putting a baby dragon, presumably, coming out of said eggs. So you're not at all in doubt with the dragon sitting in the lower part of the egg and having a bit of shell on its head, that this dragon have just hatched. It's a baby dragon. And yeah, I think the theming here is on point. Like, there is nothing wrong with it. It had been a bigger problem if they had just shown a dragon without anything to compare in scale, because how are you then to know that it's not an adult dragon? And I think they actually did it well this here. So yeah, it's a 10 out of 10 on the theming. Okay, for the general artwork, it's an interesting choice to be sure to add ground to it. I might would have skipped the grass, or at least the lower parts of the mound or hill, but definitely keeping the eggshells and such around. And so essentially cutting the hill part, maybe not the grass straws out, but definitely the mound out of this picture. It does draw a little bit of attention away from it, and it risks making areas where splotches, big splotches that are not particularly detailed are happening. I think the dragon itself looks pretty good, like especially the wing with, is that light or something like that? Well, you can basically tell that it's more or less transparent, as it's more or less just skin. I think what draws this down a bit is the egg. Now, I don't know how a dragon egg would differentiate itself from, say, a lizard egg, if we were to take in real terms, but eggs are very rarely as uniform as both eggs shown here. I feel that I'm lacking detail, and that's kind of a shame actually, because the egg, as mentioned in the theming part, is quite important here, because it shows that it's a baby dragon and not just a dragon of questionable size. So we're ending on an 8 on the general artwork. So with that, we end up at 8 plus 10 plus 4. That is 22. Bale. Or Bale. Okay. Feels good, man. I don't know why that is the description for this. That doesn't seem... I think I might actually know where that's from. That might be a Battletoads reference. If so, that is quite obscure. I've never played the Battletoads game, but I have heard of them, having spent some time on the internet and being of some age. Again, it's not great, but it's not completely in the wrong direction. We'll go for a 4. Okay, the theming. So, Bale. I don't know, with a name like that, you kind of expect some... Obviously, it's a demon, yes. But you kind of expect perhaps something a bit more fiery, something more classic devil look, essentially. It is a bit harder to thematically place this guy, because like he does fit what a demon is, and a demon is, as I spoke about the thematics that the game uses in the last one, and how I'm not always in agreement with them. Is this a demon? Yes, I can see that happening. It's got horns, it's got teeth, it's got a mean look to it. So I don't see why it shouldn't be a demon. Demons can take many shapes, but I don't think it's a good category, essentially. I don't think it's a category that shouldn't be there, but I think that it's a category that should be have subcategories to it because it is so broad. That's definitely what I would do if I was in charge of this. So, given that it's hard to place the theming on this guy, I'm going to go with a 7 out of 10, mostly because it's not clear what they actually wanted. Like, they had a name and probably had the general stat line, and then they got the artwork, which was perhaps different than what the people giving the name had intended. Okay, for the overall artwork, I do have some likes to this. It is very detailed when it comes to the horn and the mouth and the tongue. And the skin, while partly amphibian, isn't overly flat with big splotches. There are some, especially around the leg poking up, but because of the lighting and the shading added, it looks pretty good. What doesn't look as good in my book, and overall it's a small thing from this. So obviously it's meant to be saliva dripping from its mouth, but what is meant to be dripping from his hand is likely either water or slime, and it looks a bit out of place, like it was tacked on as an afterthought to, we need to signify that this guy has sticky hands. Okay, let me add some slipperiness to it. And I don't think it needed to do that. The saliva in the mouth from the tongue looks great, that's fine, but the one on the hand, is that slime? Is it saliva? Is it water? Make up your mind, okay? And again, it's a thing that I've said with some of the characters for A, that it felt like the horns were essentially on some of the characters in A, not so much for this guy, but on some of the characters in A, horns in particular felt like they were added as an afterthought and not part of the original image, and I don't like that. Stick to the artwork, that is. Like, if the artist didn't make the thing that you expected, then it's basically your fault for not communicating clearly what you wanted the artist to make. And I think that's the same for this slime on his hand. So, since it's only a small negative point, we're going with a 9 for the overall artwork. So, 9 plus 7 plus 3, that is 19. Lowest yet, but we still have quite a long way to go. Bahir. Oh. Yeah, I think that was how you would pronounce that. Every day is leg day. Now, I know what a Bahir is, because I played D&D, and that is one of the monsters you can come across if you're quite unlucky. It does actually kind of work, given that, you know, it has multiple legs, so it's not the chuttle kind of funny, but it's not a miss. And given how I'm fairly lenient when it comes to giving full points on description, you basically just have to A, not describe, either make a pun on the name, or you have to explain something that is in the picture without explaining what the picture is about, or something similar, like like you see a bug with helicopter like wing, and the description is get to the chopper, like something like that. So I'm giving this a 5. Had I gone for a 10 out of 10, a 10 scale, this would not have gotten full points. But on a 5 scale, I'm okay with saying, yeah, that's full points. It hits enough marks for doing that, and it doesn't hit enough negative marks for not getting it. Okay, the theming. I am a little confused as to why. This is also going, I'll speak a little about this in the general artwork. Why does it need the lightning? What sense does that make? Like, this monster is frightening enough as it is. It doesn't need extra to it. I think that is a weird choice. And I'm going to deduct some points from it. Other than that, I don't really see anything wrong with this particular one. So, 8 out of 10. Okay, general artwork. Again, the lightning feels really out of place. Especially because this isn't a creature placed in, like, a cloud situation or something like that. It isn't placed near lots of metal that could conduct electricity or something like that. It is located, as the background would suggest, in a desert. So why the lightning? Is it just because it's blue, so it couldn't have been flames? You can make flames blue. Like, not that flames would have fitted this any better, but why does it need an outline of lightning? I don't understand that. That is a thematical, it's both a thematical, but it's also a overall part of the artwork that feels unnecessary. And I wouldn't say it feels like it is added after the fact. It looks like it has always been a part of the artwork. So, but again, I don't see a reason why it should be there. Like, it's not like the Bahir is channeling this electricity into casting a spell. It is literally just an aura surrounding it. Why? It makes no sense if it's not using that. It's not like it's using this electricity to actively block an incoming projectile of some sort. And it's not like it's, in other ways, connected with electricity in its name or in its being. So why? So yeah, that definitely goes and takes a bit on it. The forehead horns looks tacked on as well. I wouldn't say the spine horns looks as much, but it's harder to say because they're seemingly planted mostly behind it, which could suggest that they are added after the fact and it didn't originally have horns. It's harder to say, but the forehead ones definitely feels out of place. Like, you can see that the claws and the spine horns have basically the same coloration, or also as teeth, so you would think they're likely made out of the same material. It doesn't feel as jarring with the back spikes as it does with the horn spikes, the head spikes, because, well, head horns, because they have a completely different and unrelated color scheme to the rest of the monster, the rest of the creature. So I don't see why they are added. That's a lot of unnecessary additions in my mind, added on top of a fine artwork. Like, there is fine detail in the scaling. Their scales aren't just one color. There's fine detail in the stomach plating. We talked about that before with another snake-like creature. And obviously snakes are a bit tough because they have, well, they do have scales. Those scales aren't just usually one color. Even if you go down to a single scale, there's usually a bit of a gradient going on in them. And I think that gradient actually comes out nicely in this artwork. So it's not just me nagging on about things that shouldn't be there. I am also giving credit where credit is due, and this doesn't fall into the pitfalls of making, especially the stomach plates, very just plain. Like, you can actually see the wrinkles in it. That's good artwork. That's nicely done. But why add the horns? Why add the lightning? That's a lot of unnecessary stuff for this monster. We're ending up at a 7 out of 10 for the overall art. So, 7 plus 8 plus 4 No, 5. We did give this one 5 for the description. So that is 12. That is a flat 20. Not bad, but... Baihu. A tiger does not lose sleep over the opinion of the sheep. Okay. Like, it's not really funny. Yes, it's a tiger. There's a good chance that this is a Hindu saying about tigers, and I am not a follower of said belief, and I am not well versed in Hindi sayings. So this is it's not a swing and a miss, but it's not a swing and a hit. So we're ending up at a 4 for the description. Okay, the theming. So this is meant to be a sort of a divine beast guardian-esque. With a very Asian theme going on, as you can tell from the background and from the logo where it's from. I think it hits that somewhat fine. I don't feel like the crown is fitting with the theme. The crown for me seems more to be South American, like an Amazon queen or perhaps an Aztec priest or something like that. It does not look Asian to me. But that's actually the only thing that I really feel like is out of place here. So that's a 9 out of 10 on the theming. Okay, general artwork. So this is what I spoke about before, where this is a character that's meant to be spiritual, holy, and not on the front line of combat. As such, it makes sense that the armor, or armor plating in this case, are not overly detailed with notches and scars from past battles. And they actually avoided making it overly plain looking with the armor. Like, often when you're using armor plating, there is a risk of it being just one flat surface, essentially. Maybe with a bit of lighting, maybe with a bit of shading. I think the amount of gradient that is being used to make these armor parts look good actually works out nicely. And the same goes for the emeralds that has been used to decorate it. I don't think that placing a yellow gem like this in a golden crown is the best idea. It is visible, yes, but it's basically passing as that's just another part of the plate itself. It doesn't stand out. Like, why not make that green as well? You already have a theme of jewels going, so why not go with that and make that green? Like, the feathers, they could be any color, so they didn't have to be green, but the large gem, why did you have to make that yellow on gold? That would be like white on silver. You have to kind of think about, does this stand out? And it definitely, like, it does obviously when you look at it for a while, but when you first look at it, that is not something that draws your attention. And that's kind of a shame because it's actually well done. So I'm kind of deducting a bit of points for that. The fur looks okay. Not top marks, because some of it, like the mane and the parts around the face and the tuft near what would be the elbows and such, that is detailed. The rest of it, not so much. It's kind of looking like I spoke about how one of the creatures or monsters in A was looking as if they had been pulled through a jar of Vaseline and basically smoothened out everything that could stand up. I am lacking a bit more hair, a bit more fur effect. Like, this looks too smooth. So for general artwork, we're going with an 8. Okay, so with that, we got 8 plus 8 plus 4. That is 20. Baldr. When bald people wash their face, how far up do they go? Ah, okay. Okay, that is actually pretty good. Because where does face stop if there isn't a hairline? Well, yeah, I can see that. I can see that. So that's a 5. It made me chuckle, and it kind of put a bit of odd lines of thought in my head. Okay, theming. We got a giant named Baldr, obviously. The connection to names is here with the Norse god of the same name. And said god have had many different depictions. So I'm not gonna harp on how that theming is going, because when it's a specifically named something, and that something has had many different variations of how people believe that said god or deity looks, then it's kind of irrelevant to go with the character, because like, you could say that, yeah, it's the entity, it's not who the character is. So yeah. Does this fit a sort of giant kind of vibe? It's kind of hard to tell. Like, nothing about this guy from just looking at him says uniquely giant. Yes, he's got a bald head and body tattoos, but like, a human could have that. Glowing eyes. I don't think it's established that glowing eyes is a part for giants here, so, and there are humans that also have glowing eyes for this artwork, so we can't really say for certain that this is a giant we are dealing with. And that kind of deducts at least one point, because like, the theming is there, or at least my reason for bringing theming in as part of the rating is exactly this. Like, from the theming, can you tell more or less what this guy is about? And you kind of can't with this guy. Other than he's probably not a magic caster, he's probably not a beast. Probably. But at least, most likely. We're going on a 9 with theming. Okay, artwork. This character is fairly new. I think I got him like 3 weeks ago, something like that. And this is an example of artwork done right. Now, I'm not just talking about the detail of adding the tattoos to his body, which is nice, but look at all the engravings, not just at the large shoulder plate, but every single piece of armor, either leather or metal, has those engravings. And that takes effort, and that takes concentration. You can also see that the fur beneath the leather is detailed, so you can almost count every single hair. And you can see the sort of braided golden parts that run down the part of his skirt. The only thing that I'm not 100% fond of, or at least sure I like, is the blade on his hook and chain. It's a little too plain colored compared to the rest of it, but I'm actually not going to let that deduce points simply because of how detailed the rest of this guy is. We're going on 10 for artwork. So, 10, 9, and 5. That is 24. Very close for Baldr. It seems so far that named characters, rather than generic characters, speaking of which, are more likely to get a higher rating. Well, let's see. Oh, that's not where you wanted to go. No, come back. Oh, I have to go down and find them again. That's thankfully not too hard. There we go. Bandit. He's working on a dark project. Now I believe, if I'm not mistaken, the dark project of some sort or something similar was part of the Thief games that was out some... I never got around to play the Thief games, but I think that is a reference to it. Anyway, it's a reference that I kind of get, but it's not as funny as it perhaps could be. Like, there are plenty of robbers and thieves and such that you can sort of work in on this. So we're going for a 4 out of 5 on the description. Okay, theming. Now, I've harped on about how the rogue, much similar to Demon class / race, is a bit overused. But I feel like that if anyone, it is fitting for the Bandit. That is literally their modus operandi, is to be, well, if not stealthy, then at least somewhat sneaky. Though of course there are bandits that just go straight for the thuggish kind of approach, but that's a different story. I think it's fitting very well to a bandit, so we're going with 10 out of 10 on theming. Okay, general artwork. Mostly, I think this is a good piece of artwork. You can see that the face isn't just a bland sort of emotionless surface. There is a face that tells a story, even if it is half covered. And the face mask, or bandana in this case, is detailed, and it's not just one color. It has the gradients. It even has a little bump where the tip of the nose is. And I'm certain that after the lockdowns that people have been through, that seeing a person with a mask like that is not unusual. I do think his weapons, because of both his sheathed ones and the one he's holding, does look good. So no points deducted there. I would say, however, that the choice to make his leather armor, his leather vestment, could have used a little more detail, and it's kind of odd to have it sort of show abs through that much layer of clothing and armor. Like, I'm not sure that is actually meant to be there. And it feels more like an attempt to avoid having splotches of one singular color. As you can see by his sort of the upper right chest, as there is basically no detail to it apart from a very weak gradient. Which it seems like they then tried to avoid with adding the abs on the stomach part, and what are they even meant to be, like ribs underneath his arms? That is an odd choice, and I don't think it needed it. I think it would have been better to have made it in a bit more of a, give it a bit more fuzz to sort of indicate that it was leather, or perhaps go with a different color rather than going with purple, dark blue. So yeah, for the overall artwork, we're going 9 out of 10. It's close, but there are a few things to stand out. So, with that, we got 9, we got 10, we got 4. That is 23. Bane Jaw. So he's a Vagra and an undead. And that actually... Okay. They see me Nolan. They hate him. Nice. That's how to do it. It's not hard. Like, make a pun. Just that. Just that. So 5 out of 5 in the description. Okay. This is an undead Vagara. Or, no. Well, Gnolls fall in under the Vagara umbrella, so to say. So, kind of hard to place. But, well, it gets across that it's a gnoll, and it gets across that it's undead. You can see skeleton bones, and what remains of flesh sitting left on this guy. So, yeah, you're not in doubt of what this guy is about. 10 out of 10. General artwork. This guy I like. He has a grimy weapon. He has bones that are detailed. The arm wraps are detailed. The clothing on him is detailed. And even his belt adornment, well, is probably fairly detailed. And yeah, the bones aren't just one single color. However, I don't see the need to add the purple / pink flames behind this guy. I don't mind him having glowing eyes, because he's essentially a raised undead. So there could be a number of reasons for that happening. But I don't see the reason why the flames in the background need to be there. So 9 out of 10, very close to a 10 out of 10, but not close enough. So that is another 24. Banshee. So the Banshee is... oh, well, let's take the description first. She's a real stream at parties. Nice. That's it. Again, on point with the pun. You could also have said she likes ice cream, as in ice cream, as a snack. That would also work. Plenty of things that work in the favor of this. And that's the difference between a reference that might be funny, but there's a bigger chance that a reference is miss. Where to, if you make a pun that's directly related to the character, there's a bigger chance that people get it. Now, it doesn't matter that much, but it's a personal flavor that I like. Okay, theming. So, Fae and Undead. It's a little hard to garner the Fae part. But... and the undead part isn't really clear either. Yes, she does have some sharp teeth with what could be her skin decaying from her cheek. But it's not as obvious as it was with, well, take the character just before this, the Vagara, where you were not a single moment in doubt that this was an undead creature. Here, we're basically in doubt if this creature is both of its thematic themes. And that's not good. That's actually quite bad. It's not to say that the theming of this, as in whoever put the artwork in certain categories, have done a bad job. rather, this is them not looking at the artwork and saying, hold up, is it actually clear what we are doing with what this artwork wants? Like, do we have the categories for this? Like, this could as well be a human mystic. So, the theming is weak here, and that's gonna take some points away. We're going for 7 out of 10 on the theming. So, for the general artwork, now, this is the first character in that has this. There were a couple of characters in A where it was also the case, but in general, I don't feel that there is a need to show this much cleavage unless it is a part of the character. Now, Banshees from different kinds of universes have obviously different kinds of origin stories, but mostly it's a woman scorned and dying an unhappy death because of love that was not fulfilled somehow, essentially putting a curse on them and thus making them this terrible undead being that can freeze your blood to death with her screams. I don't think she is conveying screaming enough. Like, let her face the viewer a bit more and perhaps open her arms up, open her mouth up a bit more, and go a bit more heavy in on the fact that she is actually an undead. It's kind of hard to tell. Like, yeah, sure, you could add a few skulls as pendants, but necromancers do that as well, and necromancers aren't always dead. So, again, on the theming part, there is things missing. Okay, so the general artwork. I actually really like it. Like, I don't like the fact that she needs to show this much cleavage. Why? Well, she died and she was hot when she was alive. No, that doesn't explain it. That's just an excuse. I like how the pendant is looking. I like how the gas is swirling around. And for this character, it makes sense, because she is looking and actively casting a spell. So it makes sense that she would have sort of a magical aura. It also makes sense for that aura to be connected to the pendant from her neck. That is essentially her source of magic, or perhaps even her source of her curse. Who knows? But it fits, and that's the difference between this, the background smoke effect for this, and the previous character. So, that way they essentially relate in that. And, well, they're both undead, or at least thematically they're both undead. I think the cleavage definitely pulls it down a character. It's unnecessary and basically just fan service. But other than that, I don't really have anything against this. There's a lot of detail on this character that I like. So we're going for 9 out of 10 on the overall artwork. So 9 plus 7 plus 5 plus 5. That is 21. Barbearius. So even the name itself, without any description here, would almost be enough for a 5. And then they add the description, oh, he just wants a hog, as in a bear hog. It's a 5 out of 5, almost from the name alone. So this is one of those where it's actually easier. No, it's actually not. So this character has been placed a bit far away out of the screen, either because the artwork was originally too big, or because someone felt that there's something else needed to be in the center. That's an odd choice, but that is what it is. The theming, so he's an Urska. Now Urska are not a Wakara, even though they fit that description. Originally they were Wakara, as in that was the description they fell in under. But then they added the race of Urska, which is essentially bear people. And then essentially moved all bear people away from Wakara to Urska. So, yeah, I'm not against that. That's the right way to do things, because that shows that you have an understanding that thematically Wakara, as they were called before, is too broad when it's basically everyone that's somewhat human and also somewhat beast, but not a centaur, because no, that's a different category altogether. In fact, centaurs used to be wild folk, but now they have their own race as well. So that is a good step. That's positive. Actually, what is this? Just an Urska, so he doesn't even have any other class besides that. I think that's actually good, because none of the classes fit. Well, classes or races, they are both in the kind of same mixture of bags. So you could be a rogue, essentially, and that would be your class and race. This is definitely not a rogue. Loud comes swinging in to smash stuff. And he's definitely not a knight, because he doesn't wear any armor at all. So yeah, he could perhaps go as a beast, but that wouldn't fit because we already said that he's an Urska. So yeah, I think the theming here works. It's a bear and it's a barbarian. You can't really go wrong with that. So yeah, 10 out of 10 on the theming. Okay, artwork. So obviously, when you make a bear character, you usually, depending on how much clothing and armor you want to give them, usually you'd have a lot of fur. This character does, and mostly, they've pulled this off nicely so that it actually looks like the fur is detailed. The spots that are a bit missing is around his elbow, on top of his fist, and by his right chest on the top. There are some splotches there, and I think it's kind of strange. Like, they stand out quite significantly. But that's really the only thing. So that's a 9 out of 10. So 9 plus 10 plus 5, that's 24. Barghast. Or Barghast. Cats and dogs living together. That's not really as funny. And I don't think it is actually fitting the artwork, as both heads, quote unquote, are looking to be the same kind of creature. So I don't think this is a hit. This is actually one of those that is a miss. It might be a reference, but again, references are more risky because you don't have the play on words that is more obvious, and people are more likely to miss them. So that's a 3 out of 5 on the description. Okay, so this is a beast and a demon. A demon beast, basically. Well, it does hit the sort of beast note with sharp teeth, mostly. And being quadriplegic. So I think that the theming here is fine. A demon and beast, yeah, that works. Like, this could be a hellhound, and yeah, that would be fine. That would be a fine description for this. So 10 out of 10, nothing wrong. The general artwork. So I've spoke about this before with some other creatures. This is a very one-colored creature. And the dangers of doing that is that you risk making splotches that are essentially large areas where there is very little detail. they've managed to get around this using mostly shaders and lighting effect. Which is good. I mean, that is a way to avoid dealing with splotches. And it helps this character from not looking too bland. So, and like others, it doesn't look like things were added on after the fact. Like, the flames look like they were meant to be there from the start. The only thing that might be a bit on that is the sort of flame gills or something like that on its chest. They could have been added after the fact, but I kind of doubt that that is the case, and it's not as striking as, for example, horns. That seems very much like an afterthought. So we're going with the 10 out of 10 on the artwork, actually. So 10 plus 10 plus 3, 23. Bastite Priestess. Hello Kitty. Now, I don't even have to. That is a reference, yes, but it is a, at least for me, well recognized reference. So 5 out of 5, no issue there. It works. It's a reference, yes, but I get it. And as a reminder, these reviews are subjective. So, yeah. Okay. So, the theming. So this is a divine and a monster. Now, the divine is a class that mostly goes on priests, healers, and good-hearted sages, essentially. But we've had creatures of sort of Egyptian heritage before, fitting the monster description, where to a, like, this could also go, there is also a cat race, by the way. This is apparently not a cat race, but a monster instead. And given that debacle, I'm going to deduce at least 1 point from the theming, because when there is a race that already fits what this character is about, why then slot this character into a very broad and very undefined category that monster is? So it's going to be a 9 out of 10 on the theming. Okay, general artwork. Now, this character does not have the frontline armor or rolls. And as such, I wouldn't expect there to be notches and other signs of wear and tear on her. Well, I wouldn't say armor in this case, I would rather say clothing. It is a risky choice to have a large white piece of cloth as the main clothing for a character. But I think they actually managed to pull it off very, very nicely. It is detailed as sitting close to the shape of the body. It is contoured as you can see shading and you can see lighting working to actually make it look like this piece of cloth is sitting on a body and not just sort of a surface that's put in. The same goes for the hair and the item that she is holding, the Ankh. And yeah, I think if I were to put a small amount of criticism on, it would be that the tassels by her hip and thighs are a little under detailed. Like, just add a couple of dark strings into that and you have like what looks more like, well, whatever tufts they're made of. They are a bit like the third one, the centermost one on her right has the right idea going for it. Add a couple more of those dark centers and you got that detail on point. It's a small thing, but I feel that they are significant enough to make it only a 9 on the general artwork. So, with that, we're going with 9, 9, and 5. That is 23. Bat Swarm. Are bats really mouse angels? That is that is a sort of like, it's not a pun, it's not a reference, but it works for the sake of describing what a bat is. Like, there is an old comic that's basically describing like I don't even know where I've seen it, but I know it exists, where a child mouse says to his parent, don't know the gender, so it says, look up, it's angels, and then in the next frame you see bats. So yeah, 5 out of 5 on that. Okay, the theming. So these are just a beast, and that's fitting because it's literally just a bat. Well, lots of bats. So there is nothing wrong here, and it's also going with the name like Bat Swarm. Yes, there are more than one bat here. So that works, 10 out of 10. It does what it needed to do. Okay, the general artwork. There is actually not a lot to put on to say against this artwork. They have added multiple bats in various sizes, as in to show various distances. And I think that works out well. It makes it look like there's more and that they are sort of coming towards you, which has a good effect. And in saying that, there's also detailed fur on the bats. There's veins on their wings. There are no real splotches that you could wish for more detailing on. So we're actually going with a 10 out of 10, which makes the Bat Swarm our first 25. So our first top scorer for B. Behemoth. Now this guy has been a staple and has been in for a long time as one of the old classics of this game, essentially. The description: 10 times as big as a man. It's not bad, but it's also not... It's not funny. It's not a reference. It possibly is, but I'm not getting it. So we're going with a 4 out of 5 at the description. Now, it's a monster, and here the monster depiction is fitting. You could argue that maybe it's a beast, but I think monster is the more fitting description here in general. And given how simplistic that description actually is, like a monstrous creature that basically is as large as that, and yeah, I don't have any issues with this thematically, so that's a 10 out of 10 on the theming. For the general artwork, other than the choice of coloration for the inside of its maw, which I find purple to be a bit of a strange choice. I don't have anything to put this guy down with, but it's not like I'm looking to put artwork down. I'm literally just saying my opinion as the artwork comes up like this. There's plenty of detail in it, otherwise nothing looked tacked on as an afterthought. But I'm not particularly agreeing with the purple as its sort of color here. I probably would have gone more brownish, maybe red, or maybe perhaps even a darker coloration. So yeah, that's the only thing really. So that's 9 out of 10. So 9, 10, and 4, we end up at 23. Berengari. Here we have another Urska. She has the right to bear arms. Ha! 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 Nice. 5 out of 5. Okay, is she more than an Urska? No, she isn't. So she is just a bear person. And while she has more clothing on her than the Barbarian, or Barbarian I think it was, she doesn't exactly hit the same kind of notes. Like, there's a different vibe to her. So the theming, I'd say it fits. It's still, yeah, you can see that it's a bear person. And since there isn't anything else, we can't really go for more than that. This is a named character, so it's not like we can say, does the theming match the name of the generic? If it was a generic character like Bear God, you could go in and say, does that look like the god that you'd want, sort of? But since it's a named character, you can't really do that. Unless said named character has in their name a reference to something. Like we had one that was a play on the goddess of hunt, the Greek goddess of hunt, that is. So in that, you kind of had an expectation of what the name was a reference to. You don't have that here. At least I don't, to right off the top of my head. So I can't judge it on that. I think that the theming is fine. So 10 out of 10. There's nothing to put on it. The general artwork. This is a bit of a hard one because there is more going on. There's more things that are detailed than on the Barbarian. But in saying that, there are also some of the flaws that the Barbarian avoided. The fur isn't nearly as detailed, even though the clothing is actually pretty detailed. And that's a bit of an odd choice, I think. Especially on her thigh, by the scar, not on the scar, because the scar is a nice addition to that, but near the scar is actually kind of a splotch and not really detailed. So yeah, it's I would say that this is a weaker bit of artwork than the Barbarian. So we're going with a 9 out of 10. So we end up at 24. Berserker. We're all born crazy. Some of us remain that way. Not really a funny statement, even if it is fitting. It's a 4 out of 5. It's not a miss. It's not a complete hit either. Okay, the theming. So this is a giant. Now, as with Baldr, we can't really tell that this is not a oddly colored human or perhaps an elf, but we do get a better sense of this character being big in the sort of ice coming off of him and such like that. Things you kind of would associate with giants, especially given their background image, which is also part of the theming. I don't really mention it unless it plays in, like with the Bahir that had the lightning, which was weird. But here it plays in because you can see this at least cold background. So the ice is very fitting. You expect this character to be from this area. Like, you don't expect to see this character in a desert, for example. So, and it plays into the theming. I just haven't talked about it a lot because it haven't really played in. Most of the times, the background theming goes fairly well with the character that is displayed. As is the case here, I think that Baldr could have used a bit more on the theming to compare, but I think overall it was pretty fine. Like, I already spoke about why I didn't give Baldr a full marks. So, I could do with a little more proof that this is a giant. So 9 out of 10 on the theming, the same as Baldr. I'm lacking something for scale, essentially. Okay, for the general artwork. So here we have a lot of different surfaces going on. We got hair, we got fur, we got scale, we got plate, we got horn, we got ice, and we got stone. We also got handles and such, but that's less of a surface. I think this is a great piece of art. There is a lot of detail and a lot of variation to this, and none of it feels like it's not fitting. Like, it doesn't feel like it's tacked on as an afterthought. It doesn't feel like any of it is a unnecessary addition. Like, this character could have easily had a icy background swirling around him, but it doesn't, and he doesn't need it. And that's the important part. Like, when the background filler is fitting, it's good. But if it's not needed, then it's that definitely pulls some points. I think this is a perfect piece of art for this game. So 10 out of 10. Just like Baldr. So, yeah. That's 10, that's 9, that's 4. That's 23. Birchthorn. A Fae and an Elemental. Now, Elementals I've spoken about before, but let's get to the description first before we go to the theming. Birch, please. I get it. I get it. It's a play on bitch, please. So, yeah, that's a 5 out of 5. It definitely makes me smile. It doesn't make me chuckle as much as some other puns do, but it works, it works. It's not a miss, it works, and it's a play on the pun in the name. Move on, it works. Nice. 5 out of 5. Okay, so, Elementals. Now, I have spoken out against Elementals before because they are a very broad spectrum, as they encompass all the elements, and in this game there are 6. Because they basically, like demons and other creatures, is a way too broad category on its own. I'm fine with it being there, but I think a subcategory would definitely be wanted. So, with that, I'm going with an 8 out of 10 on the theming. Okay, general artwork. This is actually kind of tough because it has... The artwork itself is good. There are not a lot of splotches. There are, especially on the leaves on his... I want to say that's his arm. And also some of the leaves on his head are a bit too flat in their colorations. And once again, we are given a background splurge that doesn't need to be there. This character is shown to be magic in nature, both literally and figuratively, given, you know, it's a nature elemental. But you already have the glowing eyes, the glowing veins, the glowing mouth. Isn't that enough? I think it is. So I think that I'm going to deduct a couple of points from the general artwork for this, because again, it has something on it that does not need to be there. No need to, like, simplifying things can be bad, but overcomplicating things and adding on and on and on and on and on, that's not good either. Keep it simple, keep it real, and this is not kept simple. So, 8 out of 10 on the general artwork. So, that lands us at a 8, at an 8, and a 5. That is 21. Bishop keeps wondering why he can't move in straight lines. And that's a chess joke for those of you who are not aware. Now, I'm not a big chess player. I enjoy it, but I'm not particularly good at it. But I know this reference, and since I'm getting the reference, that's a 5. Okay, the theming. Now, a bishop is the very epitome of a divine, well, if not exactly an angel, but a human and a divine. So, as mentioned before, divine encompasses healers, priests, and angels and celestials in other kinds of way. This guy is a bishop, which is essentially a priest times 10 or however many priests you have in your system. This guy is the leader of said priests. There are perhaps people above him, but he is definitely quite important to most priests. So 10 out of 10, yeah, this guy works. For the artwork, I don't have a lot of negative things to say about this guy, because it works as part of his theme. Now, I might not have given him scale armor, but given that this game is about believed combat, like you don't actually see there's no animated parts that where people are striking each other or throwing spells at each other, you have to imagine that part. But given that this is not a realm of peace, I think it's fair to assume that this is a battle bishop, essentially. Like, this guy would be in a chess game and would be able to defend himself, and as such would require armor. Now, one thing that I especially like is, in fact, actually the scales, but also his belt, which has a lot of detail to it. And the fact that he has long sleeves works also in his favor, because that's a danger. I spoke about the using white, and most of those that fall in under the divine class / race, because that's one that's both. That works very, very nicely, because this character is meant to be sort of signifying purity and such. But it also works because the long sleeves, while a big, relatively flat surface, it's still detailed with shaders and with lightning as to sort of signify the slight ripples that you do get in a cloth like that. Unless you have something that keeps it stiff, which this guy don't. Now, if the head of the staff had not been as detailed as it was, having a simple hilt of the staff would be a negative part. But since the head is as detailed as it is, that's not deducting any points. So I'm going to say this is a 10 out of 10. So once again, we're hitting the 25 mark. Nice. Black Beast. He's like a giant plushie of death and destruction. Okay. It's not a bad reference, but this is just my personal preference, but I have a fondness for Monty Python and the Holy Grail. And while I know that this is not the Black Beast from said area, from said film. Naming it Black Beast, you all had the opportunity to go for a Black Beast of Ark reference. You must have died while writing it or something like that. Or perhaps the cartoonist did get a heart attack while filming. Who knows? 4 out of 5. Missed it by this much. I'm holding up a hand, but you can't see that because I don't have a webcam on, but I basically showed a sign between like a little bit of air between my fingers. But that is enough to not make it 5. Because, yeah, it fits, but it's not funny. Didn't make me chuckle. And considering that it's a missed opportunity to reference the Black Beast of Ark, the Black Beast, like, it's literally in the name. That's a bit of a shame. So, yeah, can't score top marks without that. This, I believe, is just a beast. Let's see if that stands true. Yes, it does. So, the theming definitely works. Here we also have something to relay the name theming to, because it says Black Beast. It's a beast, so that part fits. Black, I would say mostly grey, but I suppose that depends on the light of the area where you're in. So I can give it some leniency in that regard. We're going with 10 out of 10 because it works for that. Okay, so the general artwork. The idea was here. And I feel like just as the Bahir tiger that we saw earlier, the focus on detail was on tufts near claws, face, and the mane on the back where the horns are coming out. And unfortunately, not much else. I see big splotches of grey, like on the front right arm. I see big splotches of grey on the flank, on the right flank that is visible. And yeah, this artwork somehow, there's just parts of it that just says simple. And like, I know I could never draw this myself, but this feels like not as much time has been put into this as some of the others. And that's actually a shame, because you have so many opportunities, especially when you are as broad with your naming schemes as possible. Because what I think, rather than giving the artist sort of an idea of pinpointers, they've basically just been given a set of names and to basically make the creatures from that list, and that's it. So essentially no thematic discussions like, no, we want this black beast, we want it to be terrifying and to be sort of dripping of blood or something like that. No. It's lacking in that direction, and I think the Black Beast artwork is very clearly a sign of that. So we're ending up at a 7 out of 10 because it just feels like a rushed job. Like, this is something that if you put, like, I don't know how long it takes to draw like this kind of thing, so this is just me throwing out in the ballpark. Like, if you use, say, half an hour to add more details to the fur that this creature very clearly has, that would make it 10 out of 10. But you didn't. So it's only 8 out of 10. Okay. So with that, we got 8, we got 10, we got 4. That is 22. Black Björn. Whoa, Black Bernie, blam blam. A bit of a stretch, but I get it. I get it. That's a 5 out of 5. Love me some Ram Jam. Okay, so the theme here, now this I believe, no, this is just an Urskar also. I thought it was a knight, you know, given the fact that there's armor on it, and they, in the past they had the tendency to, is this creature slapped in armor plates? Yes, why, it's a knight! I don't think they do that anymore, but that basically tells you how a bit of the theming went in the past. Would this guy need this much armor? Maybe. I think this guy is actually could actually do with being put in the knight category, because Azure has the knight category, and the category is basically everyone in armor who isn't throwing magic about, or who might be on a mount, but not always. Then why not this guy? So the theming here is getting a notch down for a lack of theming. Because Urskar, well, that's fine, it's clearly a bear person, move on. So yeah, the theming gets hurt a little, so that's going to be an 8 out of 10. Okay, so for the general artwork. Now, I've spoken about doing plates and artwork. So artwork with a character in plate armor. This guy falls into that pitfall of armor being like, you either go for shiny, brand new, not untouched, and then, or you go in the opposite direction and go for grime and notches and dents and such. This, for how few the notches are, they stand out very clearly and they seem out of place. I think what would have been better for this character, art style wise, was if the chest coverings were perhaps scale mail as well, because the scale mail skirt is really nice looking with various details of gradient of metallic. That works because it is small surfaces. It doesn't work as great on a big chunky plate armor as this guy is wearing. And then I'd say I'll either get more notches on the gauntlets and pauldrons, or lose the pauldrons entirely and perhaps go for some scale mail gauntlets as well. As for the weapon, it's fine. Again, they've added notches to it, which kind of seems a bit why? But I suppose it kind of works. The fur, however, the bit that is visible, is looking nice, and the amount of detail added on up near his upper line of teeth, that also looks very nice. But I think the pitfall of the armor, well, the pauldron and the cuirass, is dragging this guy down a bit. So we're landing at an 8 for its overall artwork. So that's 8 plus 8 plus 5. That is 23. Nope, 21. Getting my math done right. Blackfire Cannon. This is my boomstick. I get it. I get it. That's a 5 out of 5. I think it's funny. Perhaps not the most well-fitting tagline for this, as a boomstick is essentially, that is more used as a hand cannon / rifle. So, yeah, you know what, we're going down to 4. I get the reference, but it doesn't fit the artwork. Okay, so here we have a construct. Now, construct is a bit of a weird, because aren't a golem Isn't a golem considered a construct? No, most of this, at least for the theming in this, golems are more considered as elementals, which I find to be rather weird, as in my opinion the difference is that a golem is something that someone have created versus an elemental, which is a naturally occurring thing that is sentient. So that's but that's somewhat later because it's actually unrelated to this. I think the construct is actually one of the categories that works as intended. Mostly. There are some game mechanics part that I would like to see added to it, but well, that's not a part of the artwork, so I can't judge it on that. So the theming, so Blackfire Cannon. Now I know that it's perhaps not the most obvious color, but obvious piece of complaint, but does said fire look black or even dark to you? Because it doesn't to me. So, yeah, that's going to pull it down. We're ending up with a theming for at, well, 9 out of 10. A simple change of color of the fire could have done it. So, yeah. Okay, the overall artwork. So, constructs are a bit of a thing. You're kind of expected to find a lot of metal, perhaps some wood, and that's sort of the general main two compositions that you're likely going to find. I like this. Like, you can tell that the wood on the wheels is wood because it's brown and has that sort of veiny kind of look to it. And nothing on this character seems to be added on later as a sort of an afterthought. Maybe the flame coming out of the cannon, but that's a bit of a maybe. So, in general, I think this actually works because it doesn't do that where the metal is overly shiny. It makes it a bit fuzzy, which actually helps it avoid that which the last character had. So while there is large metal surfaces, they aren't shiny, but they aren't notched or damaged either. They're fuzzy, indicating that it's not perhaps brushed, but rather sort of more, not exactly unmanufactured, but definitely sort of, yeah, it's just meant to hold. And in this case, also be a little decorative, but it's not meant as an shining armor plate. So, yeah, I'd say that this is a 10 out of 10 on the artwork. Because I've already spoken about how the flame could be a different color as the theming. So I'm not really going to deduct points for it again. Because the general artwork has, for me, as part of the rating, does not have anything with the name, theme, or anything like that. It does have a little bit in terms of which things have we seen that relates to this, but other than that, it doesn't have any of things like that. So, 10 out of 10. So that's 10 plus 10 plus 4. 24 for the Blackfire Cannon. No, we did give it a notch down, so that was 10, 9, and 4, so that's 23. Blade Dancer. So this is what I spoke about with Wild Folk. Now you can see why you'd think a gnoll would fit into that role as well. Well, this one doesn't even have any extra things to it. Well, then let's just take him as he is, then. By the time he's finished dancing, nobody's alive to be watching. Again, it's not really funny. It might be true and it might fit, but it's not really funny. It's not really a reference to anything. So 4 out of 5 for the description. So he's wild folk, which encompasses satyrs, and until, well, recently, basically anyone that was humanoid but also goat-like in nature, or a couple of other creatures as well. But then they added centaurs and Bagara and Urska, and it kind of got messed up, to say the least. I think this is as fine a depiction of wild folk as any, so I really have nothing against this theming, so that's 10 out of 10. The general artwork. I don't have a lot to say against this piece of art. There is plenty of detail in the fur that is, and where there is not likely meant to be fur, sort of more of a flat hide or skin, there is not fur as detail. And here you see what is essentially like the weapons. Looks like they've seen plenty of use, but they still look as if that is fitting for the weapons. So I really have nothing to point against this artwork. So yeah, that's going to be a 10. So with that, we're landing on a 24, as only the description is actually lagging for the Blade Dancer. Blast Cannon. It's a lot more effective than the non-blast cannon. That one just never caught on. Again, that is a play on the name, and that is working in its favor. So that is a 5 out of 5 on the description. Okay, the theming. So this has the theming of mech. It doesn't have the theming of construct, which I'm a bit against, because why did the Blackfire Cannon count as a construct when this doesn't? Even though both are cannons, both are lightly managed by a crew, and I don't think said crew is inside, which is what I would confer to the difference between a regular construct, as in siege engines, or a mech, as a sort of you're inside a mech. In general, I don't think that mech should be a category for this. It is high fantasy, yes, and there is some technology similar to this, but I don't think that saying mech is a fitting category. So, for the category, we're going to lower it quite far, because it not only is in the wrong category, it also doesn't have the right category, which is sometimes the case where they have the right class, but perhaps not the right race, or the right race, but perhaps not the right class. So, yeah, we're going with a 6 out of 10 on the theming. I think that's the lowest scoring theming I've given so far. Okay, for the artwork. Now, much like the Blackfire Cannon, this is a mixture largely of metal and wood. And it depicts that very well. And it even has, especially the wheels have a very high amount of detail. The metal, a bit less so, but it's a bit splotchy. But I'd say it's less of an offense when it comes to metal versus skin, because metal, especially if kept somewhat decently, you expect that to have a sort of more of a plain surface, where to cloth and skin has all manner of bumps and crevasses and such. Just take a look at your palm. Like, how many details isn't there in a palm? compared to, say, a piece of metal on a car. Like, that's a single flat surface mostly. So I'm going to say that the overall artwork for this is okay. It could be better. I find it a bit too splotchy. Like, they kind of get things right with the lighting, with you sort of see the white splotches added in, but at the same time they don't go all the way in on it. Like, it feels like it's a bit of a half-assed job. So 8 out of 10 on the general artwork. So 8 plus 6 plus 5, that's going to be a 19. Blightwing. Blight me, baby, one more time. Okay, it's a bit of a stretch. I would perhaps not have used that that song. Is that like hit and blight? The two words aren't really that close together. It kind of works, but also kind of doesn't work. So I'm going to say, because it's a play on the name and because I'm lenient, it's a 5 out of 5, but it would not have gotten 10 out of 10. Okay, description. This is a demon and a beast. So we have two very broad categories that this is supposed to fit into. So it's a beast because it's a bird. And it's a demon because it has horns? Question mark? The demon part of it doesn't really feel fitting. Like, this would be perfectly fine as a beast. If it's a beast that's naturally occurring in a demonic place, that's still a beast. Even if it has demonic similarities. But I don't think, and a reason for that is I will get to in the general artwork in just a bit. So I think that this is a case of it being in one too many categories. So just make it a beast and it would be fine. We are down to 9 out of 10 on theming. Now, for the general artwork, first of all, the horns very much looks like they do not belong. They look like they were added on after the fact. Now, I've spoken out about the background flourish. Here it fits. It's green. And you can see the chest cavity of this bird is also green. So no points against that. However, I feel that most of the time spent on making this piece of art was put into the chest cavity and the green smoke surrounding it. Unfortunately, that means that the wings, which, you know, when you're drawing a bird, the wings are a quite significant part of said creature. Well, unless you're drawing a dodo. So there is a big grey splotch on the inside of the wing, especially the leftmost one, and there's big grey spots on the outside of the wings. They are lacking in detail and basically just are a sort of smudged out gradient, which works for smaller areas like a metallic scale, but it doesn't work for a very large surface, which, I mean, the inside of a wing is not a surface, it's hundreds of small feathers layered upon layer. Why not depict that? Also, now that I'm actually sort of seeing it, the tail also has a splotch, and so does both the legs. So yeah, the artwork has a lot lacking. So that's going to be a 6 out of 10 on the overall artwork. So with that, we end on 6, 8, and 5. That is 19. Blind Guardian. Follow the blind. Not really that funny, and it's not really a play on the name because 4 out of 5. This is a monster and a mystic. Okay. So with the mystic attack on it, we expect a spellcaster. Now this creature is not seen throwing any spells, perhaps other than floating. But other creatures that we've come across have been magical, have been floating without the need of magic. So I think monster is definitely fine, but I think mystic might be unnecessary. Especially since we don't see the artwork casting any spells. So yeah, that's a bit of a deduction, and it's going to end up at 8 out of 10 on the theming. Okay, for the general artwork, so here we actually have a splotch of white in almost, well, every eye. But in this, the naming actually does come into play. Even though I've said that it mostly doesn't, because the artwork should be able to stand on its own. But here it actually comes into play because the character is blind. As such, the milky white for the eyes work. It's an exception to the rule. Now, I've spoken about background fuzz and background effects. This guy, while it does show this guy emanating this purple gas, which is fine. I don't know if I would have made it in a different color, but it does sort of encompass him. I think, however, that the parts of it in the foreground, so the part to the right of his head and the part below him, plus the part to the bottom left of him, is kind of unnecessary. The part swirling around him and through his mouth gives a nice effect, and it keeps that sort of thin veil without actually taking attention away from the artwork itself. So, there are definitely room for improvement here. I'll say that this lands at an 8 out of 10 for overall artwork. So, 8 plus 8 plus 4, that is 20. Boar Rider. He can literally bore you to death. Hey, nice. Nice. So that's a 5 on the description. Okay, so this is a goblin and a beast. Now, since it's a Boar Rider, that actually refers to the rider itself as being the main character. But the beast is also there. So they're both there. There's a goblin and there's a beast. It fits. So really nothing wrong with the theming there, and the name, yeah. Had it been named something else, we could have talked about it, but yeah, it fits with it being a Boar Rider. So 10 out of 10. Okay, the artwork. I don't have a lot of negative points about this one. There is a tattered cape, there is fur as a sort of head protection, there is skin that is colored, there's teeth. So basically this artwork doesn't have anything that's not working in his favor. I'm going to say that's a 10 out of 10. So, with the Boar Rider, we hit 25. Bogstrider. He's doing fine. Nice. So that's a 5 out of 5. Okay, so this is a elemental and a monster. So, again, we get the elemental in Obrid. And I'm kind of torn. Because I don't per se like the elemental tag as a race or class. But I also don't like monster as a race or class. The thing is, with how this guy is looking, and that's part of the theming, he could go as either. And as such, he could also go as both. I think it actually is fitting. So I'm only going to deduct a general point in the theming, because I just generally dislike those two class/races. But other than that, I mean, it fits. It looks muddy, like something that's crawling out of a swamp, or stomping around in low waters near a mangrove forest. So yeah, I'm going to give it 9 out of 10 on the theming. Had there been a better category, this would have gotten 10. Okay, so for the general artwork, this is good, with very little to point out. There is no unneeded added things, there's no background fluff to disturb, and there is a lot of detail, as you would expect from a character made of vines. There could have been some easy steps, like, oh, he has leaves to cover bigger areas, but he doesn't actually have that. And that makes it that this is a 10 out of 10. So, 10 plus 9 plus 5, that is 24. Bombardier. He is the ultimate photobomber. See, here, this is my boomstick would have worked better. But, photobomber, I don't think that photo has a lot to do with this. Bomber, yes, definitely. But photo, no. So we're going for a 4 out of 5. Okay. This guy is just a dwarf. That definitely seems to fit. Like, his proportions doesn't seem to be human, and definitely not elven. And I would say that it probably fits with how a dwarf would look. So yeah, I'm going for a 10 out of 10 on the theming. Nothing wrong. As for the artwork, there are unfortunately quite a lot of skin on this character. And that does not work in his favor. His arm and... well, that's actually a leather chest. But his arms is a little on the under-detailed side. The same goes for the piece of cloth that he's wearing to keep his mask in place. It could be better. Mostly it works, but it just feels largely it feels under detailed. I like how the hand cannon looks. It has the right amount of sheen to it, while going for a clean style. Perhaps more artwork like runes and such could be added to it, but it works as is. I think this again was a job that was done a little too quickly and just sort of shipped off like, yeah, on to the next one. You can also see that the fur on the sort of shoulder is a little without detail, like a couple of black strings here and there that would actually solve that. And the same goes for the skin, like you could add tattoos. Just don't make it a bland splodge of things. So we end up at an 8 out of 10. So with that, we go for 8 plus 4 plus 10. So that is 22. Bombot. Tick, tick, tick. That's a 5 out of 5 because you're not in doubt about what that's doing. Now, this is a mech. Again, my idea of mech and the fact that I don't think that mechs should be a option means that I'm going to have to deduct some points from this as its theming. So that's going to be an 8 out of 10. Again, because it's not a construct, despite it very clearly being constructed. And I don't believe that it is a piloted construction. So yeah, it's not only in the wrong category, it's also not in the right category. So, the artwork. It's obviously meant to be a giant bomb. But, well, here's what I think is wrong with how that is. It is meant to come from a very mechanical society. And yet it has a very archaic fuse to it. And much like horns and other kinds of added on as an afterthought, it feels to me like the fuse was not meant to be there in the first place. But someone somewhere thought that, oh, we can't really tell that this is a bomb. Which I suppose is true, but it does nonetheless seem odd when you have a depiction of gears, something that would indicate that this could be engineered to explode when it reaches its destination rather than relying on a fuse. So, yeah, again, the fuse is a unnecessary added on. I think, given what I've spoken about with metallic surfaces, it works the amount of splotches and wear and tear into this as one would expect. So I'm not going to deduct point for it looking like that. So we're ending up at an 8 out of 10 on its general artwork for the unnecessary fuse. So 8 plus 5, that is 21. Bone Demon. Shake, rattle and roll. Other than one, there really wasn't much that has any relation with it being a skeleton, so that's going to be a 4 out of 5 on the description. Okay, the theming. So this is an undead and a demon. Now the undead definitely is easy to see. It's a skeleton walking about, menacingly even. So no point on that. Demon, as stated, demon is a little harder to place because of how broad it is, so I'm going to deduct 1 point from the theming. It does look like you can't tell if that's just a creature that looked like something like that with that bone structure in living life and then became undead. So yeah, 9 out of 10 on the theming, because demon is just too vague. So for the overall artwork, in general, I like it. The bones, particularly around the cranium and the flesh remains on the shoulders, looks good. As does the hands and ribcage. The tail and the wings, however, looks simplified and almost as if they were added on as an afterthought, actually. And by this point, you know how I feel about that. So we are ending up at an 8 out of 10. So 8 plus 9 plus 4. That's going to be 21. Bone Dragon is cool. Nothing gets under his skin. Ha! Because he doesn't have any. I get it. 5 out of 5. So this is a dragon and undead. And here I think, unlike the one before where it wasn't clear that it was a demon, here it's quite fairly clear that it's a dragon, and it's also clear that it's undead. 10 out of 10. Nice. Okay, now for the artwork. This does not look like anything was added as a part later on. It has plenty of grime, as if the flesh have just recently fallen off of the bones. And it looks awesome. 10 out of 10. This one gets a 25. Bone Naga. He likes a good ripping, particularly if it's humorous. Again, bone puns. Nice. It's so simple, and it works. 5 out of 5. Okay, theming. Naga, that is basically snake people. You can see that. It has a snake-like structure. It's also undead. You can see that. It has a skull and bones. Presumed to be undead. 10 out of 10. Nice. The artwork, however, where the Bone Dragon had lots of detail, this one is definitely lacking. Apart from the actual spinal column, this thing is very, very under-detailed. Everything apart from the teeth looks like as if it was just plainly carved out of a clean surface. That is not a good piece of art. That's oversimplified and looks like a rush job. That's going to be a 7 out of 10. So, 7 plus 10 plus 5, that is a total of 22. Bone Scorpion. This is an undead beast. Now, could you tell from looking at this? Well, let's first go with the description. We have a way of doing things. Let's not break it up. Look who crawled out of the mezcal bottle. That doesn't make any sense to me. So, that's a 3 out of 5. It's not. It's a reference, and it's a reference that I don't get. So that's deducting points. Okay, the theming, beast and undead. Now, from this artwork alone, can you tell me that this is a creature that has died and through some means come back to life again? See, I cannot. This could be a silver scorpion or anything like that, like just by the name. But the only indicator that this is undead is in the name, that it's a bone scorpion. That's honestly not a lot to go by. So, yeah, I'm going to say that it did. I'm deducting 1 point. 9 out of 10 on the theming. Okay, the general artwork. So, it does have some splotchy areas, particularly on parts of the tail and on the pincers. But it manages to get a lot of detail on the rest of its body, particularly the head. That seems to be a general theme, that the heads of creatures and people is generally more detailed than anything else. Other than that, there isn't a lot of color to go on. Like, yes, some of the chest scales are either broken or missing so that you can see inside, but again, that doesn't say this is undead. Like, there's no clear-cut indicator that this is an undead creature. I think the artwork is pretty good. I'm going with a 9 out of 10. So, 9 plus 9 plus 3. That is 21. Bonebinder. He's bad to the bone. Bad. Okay, that works. 5 out of 5. He's a dwarf and he's a mystic. He is bearded, doesn't have pointy ears, fairly broad nose, seems to be broad-shouldered. Yeah, it's probably safe to assume that this is a dwarf. He is holding a staff. Looks like he's about to cast a spell. He has arcane objects on him. Yes, he looks like he's a mystic. Okay, it fits. 10 out of 10. Nice work. Okay, for the general artwork. So this is a character that... Now, the difference between a good back flourish and a bad back flourish is very simple. Do they look like, whatever they are, that they are emanating off of the character? In this case, while they are fitting in color, perhaps from the bottle, perhaps from the gemstones that is on the staff, but they don't seem to be exhuming from him. So unless he is a really visible farter, and I don't think that plays into it, I'm going to say that the background flourish is unnecessary here. That, however, is actually the only thing that I have against this guy's artwork. So that's a 9 out of 10. So 9 plus 5 plus 5 plus 10, that is 24. Close but no cigar for the Bonebinder. Bone Biter. Oh my god, that nipple ring. Well, yes. That is correct. But why? Again, we've had things like this before where they are the description, rather than trying to be funny, punny, or referential, instead simply points out something on the artwork. And I'm not going to add points for that, so it's going to get a 3 out of 5. Okay, so for the theming, a giant. See, again we're kind of lacking something to show the scale. This could just be a primitive man with a club. We don't have any indicators that the war paint or the clothing is, or the skin coloration is that of giants, so we don't know anything about that. Is he anything else than a giant? No. Okay. So the only thing that we can say about him is that he's a giant. And we can't really say that for certain. So... yeah. That's an 8 out of 10 on the theming. Okay, so for the general artwork. This character does right what the Bombardier did wrong. This character does have a lot of skin, but there's a lot of detail to it, like either red marks, some light hairing, or some just shading or actual tattoo war paint. So that works in his favor. He's also has hair under his arms, which, I mean, that's a neat detail. Not a lot of characters would show that, even though that's a perfectly natural part of a body. I like the amount of detail in the fur on his belt / loincloth and on the fur covering below his shoulder padding. The leather on the shoulder padding, I don't think it would be as shiny if we are to believe that this character is a fairly primitive giant that lives in the middle of nowhere, hunting and eating and killing whatever it can come close to. I think less sheen on the leather would have made this perfect. So we are going at a 9 out of 10 on the overall artwork. With that, we end up at 9 plus 3 plus 8. That is 20. Tibia or not tibia? That is the question. Okay, it's it's obviously a play on to be on what to be, but it doesn't work nearly as well. It's a stretch. A long stretch for that. So we're going to 4 out of 5. The humor is there if you stretch it out. And it doesn't just naturally come off as... like, it's not something that the instant you see it, you know what it is. You sort of have to pause and be like, oh! And that kind of deducts a point. Okay. So this is an undead dwarf. How can we tell? It's bearded, doesn't have pointy ears, seems stocky, and is covered in arrows and has show visible bones or skin decay. Ergo, the creature is no longer alive, it must be undead. Okay, it fits. 10 out of 10 on the theming. Right. So, as for the overall artwork, I like how the hands look, and I like how the blood in the beard remains look, and also the face. The arrows are a nice touch too. However, I think the armor looks too nice. Especially considering how the Warhammer looks, I think that is a probably more correct depiction of a long dead dwarf warrior clad in armor of various kinds. The other armor seems too shiny, even if it has notches and signs of wear and tear. So I'm going to deduct points for the for that. So that's going to be an 8, because given how much armor he has, that's rather glaring. So we end up at 8, 10, and 4. That is 22. Bunny rose, and Providence shall be her guide. I'm not entirely sure about the reference, so that's going to be a 3 out of 5. She is a human and a rogue. Now, if I were to place a pirate as anything, a rogue would definitely be the class for it. So I'm going to say that's a 10 out of 10. Okay, so for the general artwork, this is one of the female characters that, while yes, she does show cleavage, she isn't overtly busty, and showing it off is not the point of the artwork, but rather that's likely how the character would be, thus making it acceptable. So this is a fairly clean character, which means that all the surfaces aren't grimy and they aren't shiny either. They're sort of plain, but so where we have to look for detail is in things like a face, hair, and things like the feather and the rose, and also the hilt of her rapier. And apart from the face, they're good. The face is a little bland and without much emotion, which is a shame because that's really the only thing that's quote-unquote wrong with this piece of artwork. Everything else works. So that's 9 out of 10. The face could have done with a little more emotion. This is just a blah. Like, you feel nothing from the face alone. And that's a shame because the hair is nice, the feather is nice, the rose is nice, the clothing is nice, the bodice is nice, the rapier is nice. Just not the face. So, with 9, plus 10, plus 3, that is 22. Book of Secret. The secret is, it's not really a book. I like that. Having played D&D and having interacted with mimics, this is a good reference. So, that's a 5 out of 5. So this is a construct and a mystic. So this has been constructed by someone. I'm not sure if I agree with that. Mystic? Is it throwing any spells? It's not, is it? So both of its class/race themes are kind of off. What I would say that this thing is a monster. Because since we have that category, that's where I'll put it. Would I give it something else? No, I don't think so. So, it's going to be 8 out of 10 on the theming. Because it does look like a book. And it does look like it would contain secrets, given that it has a lock on it. Okay, so for the artwork, oh boy. While there is a lot of things that has done right, there certainly are also things that this is not doing right. First and foremost, the teeth looks like they have been added on afterwards, as if the book only had the eye to begin with, and even the eye doesn't look like it belongs on top of the book. It doesn't look as if it's part of it. It looks as if it's been attached later, as if someone came along with a stick of glue and a eyeball and slapped it on a book. The same goes for the teeth. They don't look like they were originally a part of the artwork. They look like they've been added on afterwards. As if the Book of Secrets needed to be a reference, but wasn't originally going to be. The tongue doesn't look as much as added on, but it lacks detail other than the bit of saliva that is added to it. So there's a lot that's not going right for this piece of artwork. The lock and chain looks good, and I have no complaints about the surface of the book either. The paper looks nice, and the corner coverings also work, although they are perhaps a bit too shiny. I would have gone for a bit more fuss to make it a bit more like a rough look, or perhaps a darker color like the one used on the chain. So with all that, given that it has not one but two things that looks off, and the tongue not being very detailed, that's gonna put it down to a 6 out of 10. So this is gonna be a fairly low score. It scores maximum on the description with a 5, but the theming is 8, and the artwork is 6. That lands us at 19. Borealis. Winter is coming. Really? That's what you thought was what people were thinking of when you sort of Borealis? Why not steamed hams? Come on. Yes, people have been watching Game of Thrones, but I bet you more people have been watching The Simpsons. And for how iconic a meme the Aurora Borealis steamed hams meme have become, I would say that Game of Thrones was not the correct way to go for this. 4 out of 5, you missed the mark. Okay, so this is just a dragon, and that's fine. It works. Nothing wrong with it. It looks like a dragon. 10 out of 10. So, for the artwork, apart from, well, this wing isn't supposed to be made of skin. It's supposed to be made of ice. Given that, I'd say that there's not really anything that I can see I would do different about the artwork, so that's a 10 out of 10. So we end up at 24. Bor'Gakk. A centaur. His mom was bored. Okay, it kind of works, given that it is supposed to be sort of like a boar centaur. They say orc. I don't know if I agree with that. Like, centaur part, yes, I can see that. Orc, I don't know. So I'm going to, well, his mom was bored, 5 out of 5, that works. Like, yeah. It would not have gotten 10 out of 10, but on a 5 out of 5 scale, it gets the 5. So for the theming, I think that's a 9 out of 10. It almost worked. I don't think this is an orc, because the boar part could explain the tusks, so orc kind of puts it off, and the skin coloration is not very orc-ish. So yeah. Okay, for the overall artwork. Well, so there is the background fluff. It doesn't emanate from the creature, so off with it, 1 point off. The character is grimy, and as such doesn't have any clean surfaces. That works, no points deducted. There is something anatomically, well, anatomically is probably the correct, if not, well, it's probably not a correct term, but in this case I would say that that is actually the correct term, because what is wrong with this, with the boar part's belly? I get that it's not meant to be like as flat as if it was a horse, but the upper part of this boar centaur is... Given that it's a bare-chested one, I'm going to hedge a bet and say that it's male. So, is it a male centaur with a bear belly? Because it certainly looks like a bear belly if that thing is not pregnant. That's weird. And I actually can't stop looking at it, and the longer I'm staring, the more weird it's getting. Okay, let's focus on something else. Okay, so I'm not sure if the red on his chest are meant to be scars or war paint. I'm going to assume that they are scars, because they're similar to what is on the lower half. But particularly the one near its front legs, that doesn't look like a scar. That looks more like it's been painted on. So, yeah. This thing had lots going for it, but there's a lot of weird choices that was taken while making this. So we're gonna give it a 7 out of 10 because the coloration and such is good. Like, there is a little large amount of skin, which means that it suffers from the same that we've spoken about before, that it's kind of lacking detail, especially on the leftmost chest and his right arm. And then there's the whole anatomy anomaly, so I can't even say it now. It looks off. So yeah, 7 out of 10. And so 7 plus 5 plus, what did we say? Oh yeah, 9 out of 10 because he doesn't look orcish. So that is a 16, 21. Brawlmaster Bur'Nakh. First rule of Fight Club. Ha! Nice. That's a 5 out of 5. That's a reference that I get, so that's good. Okay, the theming. He's an orc. Nothing else. We can't deduce anything else from this guy. Well, he certainly looks like an orc. So, yeah, 10 out of 10. That we can't really say anything about it. So for the overall artwork, I literally just spoke about how to do skin. This is not the answer. There is... At first it looks like this character has a lot of detail going for it, and if you're only looking at the leather part of the bracer and the horns of the ram on his shoulder and his teeth and his hair, you'd be right. But if you're looking at his skin and the cuffs of the bracer, you'd be able to see that that is actually not the case. Here, it has been given a glossy kind of surface by use of a lot of white dots, and I don't think it looks good. And this is not just the coloration, like this is a lack of detail masked by an attempt at making it more detailed. But particularly the cuff of the bracer, that's meant to be fur. That looks like some bland kind of rope that has been given Vaseline and basically slapped on top and cleared of anything fuss. Come on. You know how to do it. You have done it with the hair. It's the same principle for fur. Yes, it is actually bothering me. In case you couldn't tell. I'm going to say that this is a 7 out of 10. So, 7, 5, and 10, that is 22. Brian the Lucky. Cheers! That's it. That's literally it. It's boring. And it doesn't say anything about the character, it doesn't say anything about his name. Nothing. 2 out of 5. It's the worst description score I've ever given so far. But it's so nothing. Okay, for the theming, he is a human and he is a knight. He is clad in armor and he looks to be human. Okay, that fits. Can't really say anything against that. Since we don't have any other kinds of categories for that, like he's clearly not a rogue. So, and he doesn't look like he's a mystic. So, if we absolutely need to slap a class on this guy, knight would be the thing to slap. Right, so that's a 10 out of 10. Yeah, we can't really say much. So, for the artwork, Brian the Lucky is a mixed bag. Because while his face does have a lot of emotion, it's not just a flat surface. The helmet that he is wearing, especially the lower part, is very much a flat surface. And the same goes for his, like, pleather gloves. This character actually works without having armored gauntlets and huge shoulder pauldrons. And the cuirass actually looks acceptable. The sheen is a bit much on the front, but other than that, it works. It goes for a no-notches style, which, given the condition of his sword, you might find a bit odd, but I'll say it's acceptable for the time being. So I'm not going to do deduce point for it. I do think that it's a little much on the helmet, at least the lower part of it, because the lion/dragon's head and the wings have a nice amount of detail and isn't a flat surface. So it's a 9 out of 10 on the general artwork. So 9, 10, and 2. That is going to be 21. Broker of Greed. It's not greed, it's enlightened self-interest. It's not a hit, but it's not a complete miss either. 4 out of 5. Okay, the theming. This is a rogue and a demon. It has horns, it has red skin, it is a rather flexible looking character. It doesn't appear to be in full armor. I would say that that is an acceptable use of rogue and demon. 10 out of 10. Even though I don't like the demon and rogue added, like rogue is in itself fine, but it's way too broad, and demon the same. But here they work to describe that character. Okay, so for the overall artwork, let's start with the most obvious, the background flourish. Does it emanate from this character? Yes. So it is acceptable here. And no more comments will be on it for this character. So here we have a fairly flat main surface. It's a cloth for the sort of main attraction. It's dark, which means that you draw more attention to the lighting rather than the shading. That is counteracted by the fact that the accent on this dark vestment is golden. Now, gold and black usually goes very well together. Gold, black and silver also goes very well together. It's not like it's brown and copper, which we saw on the apothecary, which had a very bland vibe to it. You don't get that with black and gold or black and silver. Had it been white and silver, that wouldn't have worked so well, and yellow and orange and gold doesn't work as well either. The contrast is what makes for a strong accent in clothing. That is absolutely here. He has a kind of poofy, flamboyant piece of shirt under that is sort of creamy, and that has a lot of detail to it as well, because it is, for once, it is tucked under a leather gauntlet in each arm. That means that it is sort of pushed back a little, which it shows, but it's at the same time, it does appear to show the parts where it would actually touch, presumably skin beneath. So I really can't fault this character in the art direction. Nothing looked tacked on as an afterthought, and really it's great artwork. It's as simple as that. So 10 out of 10. So 10, 10, and 4. 24 for the Broker of Greed. Not bad. Brownie. He's got all the points. Well, we'll see about that. So, obviously that's a reference to brownie points, and I get it, I just don't think it's all that funny. Like, you could go with don't call him Cookie, because he's a brownie. Stuff like that. So, 4 out of 5 on the description. So already there, the description is lying. I'm almost tempted to, just for the sake of that actually makes me kind of giggle, because then he doesn't have all the points, even though the description says he got all the points. But no, it stays at 4 out of 5 for the description. Okay, now at first glance you might think this is a dwarf. He has the stocky kind of look, he has a large beard and a large nose, but he has pointy ears, which most dwarves do not. They have small rounded ears. This is in fact a fae, and that's the only thing that is classified, that is sort of a thematic thing on this guy. And I think he would be a gnome, essentially. But because gnomes appear later on in this game, I can't give him that description either, because that would go against this game. Like, if I saw this piece of artwork outside of this game, 100% that's a gnome. But not here. So, 10 out of 10. You can't... See, the thing about the themes is, while some of them are very, very broad, you also have characters that don't really fall into any of the character categories, or fall very on the edge of a category. However, if such a character only occurs once, you cannot really make a full-blown category for them alone. So I get the kind of balance, but I think that overall most categories are way too broad. Okay. So for the artwork, so there is a bit of skin, and generally like this piece of artwork. Actually, my only gripe is that the eyebrows and mustache appears to be of a different color white than the rest of the beard, and it looks like almost like it is tacked on as an afterthought. So you know how I feel about that. So yeah, that's going to be a 9 out of 10. Close, but no cigar. So that's 9 plus 10 plus 4. That is 23. Bugbear. A face only a mother could love. I don't know. I've seen worse faces in this. We'll definitely see some later. I'm going to say 4 out of 5. It's not wrong. It's not funny. So he's meant to be a mixture between goblin and orc. I can see that. He has the green and the ear flaps of goblin, and he has the teeth and nose of an orc. Yeah, I suppose that's fitting. Again, this is the sort of creature that where else would you put him if not in those? So I think it's fitting. 10 out of 10. Okay, the general artwork. So here we have a character that goes for grime on weaponry. That works. It looks nice. It looks worn. It looks bloodied. It looks like unpleasant. We also have the fact that they are armored, but they don't fall into the pitfall that is to make it overly shiny. Could this armor be more dented up? Perhaps. But I honestly think that it's fine as is. It has the correct amount of fluffiness to its texture, that it doesn't look brand new, which is probably the case. And the hair that is on his arms looks very, very detailed. And while I could use the transition from fur to hand on his right arm is a bit sudden and not almost non-existing on his left arm, I think it's overall as close to fine as it could be. We're ending up at 9 out of 10 on the general artwork. So 9 plus 10 plus 4, that is 23. Bul'Tauros. Faster than a speeding bullet. I get it. Faster than a speeding bullet. 5 out of 5. Good. Okay, this is a beast and a monster. So what differentiates the two? I am not sure. Could it be size? Possibly. But could it be how they appear, how often they appear? Possibly. We don't know. I agree on both, but I don't agree that it is both at the same time. I would have accepted the Bul'Tauros as a monster, and I would have accepted the Bul'Tauros as a beast, but I do not accept the Bul'Tauros as both. So that's going to be a 9 out of 10. Take one of the categories away, and the Bul'Tauros is good to go. So, for the artwork, I don't have a lot to say about this. It rings in on the right things. It does have large plates, but those are meant to be of bone, and they do look like that. It has a fairly rough, but also fairly simple skin, but yet that skin is detailed with wrinkles, folds, dimples and whatnot. So nothing there. The only thing that's and that's more of a question than is actually pulling points away, is the eye coloration. I'm not sure that deep a blue would be, especially, you know, if we're going to call that, say this is a beast, like dark brown, maybe closer to black, maybe, but keep the sheen on them, obviously, because that's not a part of it. But I don't think I would have made them this blue. But I'm not going to deduct points from it because that's a small thing, and I think that's more related to the theming. If we say that the Bul'Tauros is only a monster, fine, go with any whatsoever weird eye color you want. If we say that the Bul'Tauros is a beast, go a bit more natural on the coloration. But that's for theming, that's not so much for general artwork. We're ending up at 10 out of 10. So, 10 plus 5 plus 9, that is 24 for the Bul'Tauros. Berserker. Simply irresistible. That's a 5 out of 5. You got the pun down. Nice. So here we have another play on Berserker. This is a Berserker. And as you can see, this is a Tauros. Even though, so the Tauros was one of the races that was added after the fact and wasn't originally in the game. They were wild folk, similar to the Blade Dancer, which was a goat person. So yeah, I'm okay with it, with this race being its own. I just think that you should then go more into seeing, are there similar things where you could make a race like that and slap that on? Because you have the Yaga, who is basically wolf or fox humanoids. But if you're arguing that a goat humanoid and a bull humanoid are not in the same race, I would argue that a fox and a wolf humanoid are not in the same race. But yeah. So that's a general gripe about the theming, but it has nothing to do with the Tauros here. So, no points deducted for that, 10 out of 10. The artwork. Again, there are positive points to this, but there are most certainly also negative points. First and foremost, the positive points. The beard and back mane and the fur of the pauldron and armor coverings looks good. The metal surfaces of the weapon looks nice, that works. Looks rough without looking too grimy. Nothing against that. But the spikes on the shoulder pauldron look way too shiny to fit in. And the backing of the pauldron, like the main armor plating, has been given the same treatment as the orc from before. So basically just a lot of white dots on a otherwise plain surface, and use that to sort of act as lighting. It is not, it's a cheap method, and it really shows as rather, it's rather obscure here. I also don't like the lack of detail in his face. Like, from his eye and to his nose, there's basically nothing. And there's a huge spot between his beard and his sort of lower lip. That's also just like one color. That's And the horns also doesn't look like they were part of the artwork to start with. Like, you can see that it's sort of like, especially with the rightmost ear, how it interacts with his ear looks as if it was never there to begin with. You can also see that the hair doesn't really move around it, so that furthers my idea that this has been slapped on as an afterthought because he needs to be a bull. Why? I mean, doesn't have to be. Like, there are bulls that run around without horns. Sure, most bulls have an indicative horn as sign that they are bulls, but even bulls get their horns clipped, and cows can have horns too. So I don't get why this guy needed to have horns. I would have accepted him as a Berserker even without the horns. So for the artwork, we're going up at, given how many flaws that I find to this, I'm going to say that's an 7 out of 10. So 7 plus 5 plus 10, that's 22. Bul'Nakh. He ain't nothing but a horned dog. So this is a Tauros Vargara, or a Bul'Nakh, as the name would suggest. 5 out of 5 for the Elvis reference, I get it. And it also fits the picture. So, for the theming. So he's a Minotaur and a Vargara. So, I mean, that fits. So, yeah. I will say that can I see his feet? No, I cannot. I don't assume that he has hooves. So I'm going to say the only bull part of him is, apart from his frame, the horns. So like the last one, if horns is the only bull part, and besides, we've seen demons with horns. Why not make it a demon Warrior? So I'm going to deduct a single point. It might be right as a Warrior Tauros, but I don't think that they have done enough of the Tauros to really give it that. So 9 out of 10. Okay, for the general artwork. First off, does this character emanate any kind of background fluff, flourish? No. Get rid of it. Secondly, this character is shown to have mostly, like, the fur covering is rather undetailed. And the horns also looks like they have been added as an afterthought. So the skin coloration does look nice, and that does work. But given how little detail there is in the fur, the mane, and the fur on the pauldron and the belt, it's gonna deduct some points. With the horns just being slapped on for, it needs to be a bull. Yeah, that's going to be I'm going to say 7 out of 10 on the overall artwork. So 7, 9, and 5. That is a total of 21. Bul'Tauros. No, this is not a Taurus. This is a centaur. Well, large centaurs seek small china shop for fun times. I get the reference, but I don't think it's that funny. 4 out of 5. Okay, so for the theming, Centaur. I mean, that is right. I mean, this is a Centaur. The artwork just is placed rather poorly, so we can't really see how much Centaur there it actually is. It could just be a brown-skinned man with a bad posture. Does it? No, the small artwork doesn't show anymore. Because of the position of the artwork, given the fact that we can't really see for certain that it is a Centaur, I'm going to deduct, I think, a single point of the theming. So, that's going to be a 9 out of 10. Okay. So, for the overall artwork, I spoke about how you either go in grime or shine direction. This has gone for shine, and that works. I also like, as I spoke about before with Baldr, I like how detailed the armor, the inner workings of the armor is, how neatly it has been carved out. That takes a long time to draw and to color in. That's not nothing, and it shows. The skin is rather bland and undetailed, but it works because of how much the gradient is there. It's not just one color shifting over, there's actually multiple layers, and the shading and lighting works nicely. 10 out of 10. So that is 10 plus 9 plus 4. That's 23. So for our last one with B, Bunni'Nog. Oh, it's just a harmless little bunny, isn't it? So here they've definitely gone for the Monty Python and the Holy Grail reference. Which I can't help but give it 5. Like, they landed the Monty Python and the Holy Grail reference, which is one of my favorite films of all time. So, yeah, no complaints there. Perhaps there are other words from that scene that could have been a little more on the nose, but you already see, like, this. I wouldn't normally go into anything else than the artwork and the name, and the description, obviously, but you see the clear reference in what one of its abilities, nasty teeth, big pointy nasty teeth. And the fact that it does extra damage against knights, obviously, that's a neat callback. Okay, so this is a wild folk and a beast. I suppose it has been made somewhat humanoid. I would say that either you go Vakara, which is beast men, essentially, or you go beast. You don't mix those two, because beast is a natural creature that, while somewhat sentient, isn't a quote-unquote man. It's a beast found in the wild. Where to wild folk is a somewhat civilized group of people. So I would say either go beast or Wakara. So again, it's a matter of don't put it in two categories when one is enough. 9 out of 10. So for the artwork, there are things that are nice. The outlines of the fur looks fuzzy. That's good when you're talking about a furred creature. I could use a bit more of a clear indicator as to what is fur on the face and what is actual teeth. At least on the upper jaw, that is not particularly clear. It's more clear on the bottom jaw. On the upper jaw, it's kind of hard to tell if it's just the fur that then becomes teeth. How does that work? There are also a few splotches, particularly on the right arm of the Bunni'Nog. That is basically white splotches. White greyish splotches. And that doesn't exactly look great. So we're ending up at an 8 out of 10 on the general artwork. So our final B lands at 8 plus 5 plus 9. That is 22. So in the next one we will tackle everything beginning with C and see how that goes. Ha! Ha!